Chapter 3. Legislative Teachings, Other Monastic Offices. All leaders should be assisted by others. In the monastery, there is the abbot's assistant called the prior, and then there are deans, if the community is large enough. This shows that leadership should never be fully vested in one person, but in a group. Other leaders provide the main leader with accountability and are a check on her leadership if necessary. Sometimes congregational leaders isolate themselves, unfortunately. This is not always intentional, but it is never a good idea. Isolation can lead to myopia. That is, a leader is too isolated to know what is best for the whole community. Other leaders can ensure that this does not happen. Further, it also gives voice to everyone in the community, for sometimes it is the youngest member who has the greatest wisdom in a particular situation. Shared leadership values the input of everyone, helping to ensure that the organization remains a true community, not just a group of people surrounding one charismatic leader. The deans of the monastery. If the community is large, there should be chosen from it brothers of good reputation and a holy way of life to be appointed deans. They are to carefully oversee their deaneries and everything according to the commandments of God and the precepts of their abbot. The ones chosen deans should be those with whom the abbot may confidently share his burdens. Thus, they should not be chosen according to the order of seniority, but rather for the merit of their lives and their wise teaching. Should any of these deans become inflated with pride and be found to have acted reprehensibly, if having been corrected once, twice, and even a third time, he refuses to amend, let him be deposed, and in his place there should be substituted another who is worthy. And concerning the prior, we establish that the same procedure is to be followed. The qualities of the monastery cellarer. As monastery cellarer, there should be chosen from the community one who is wise, of mature character, temperate, not an excessive eater, not haughty, not turbulent, not harmful, not sluggish, not wasteful, but God-fearing, one who can act as a father to the whole community. He is to have charge of everything. He is to do nothing without an order from the abbot. He is to keep custody over his orders. He is not to sadden the brothers. If one of the brothers happens to request something unreasonably, he is not to treat him with disdain and thus sadden him. Rather, he must reasonably and with humility deny the bad request. He is to keep custody over his own soul, remembering always that apostolic saying, "He who has ministered well acquires a good standing for himself." 1 Timothy 3:13. He is to care for the sick, for children, for guests, and for the poor with all solicitude, knowing without doubt that for all these he will have to give an account on the day of judgment. Luke 16:2. He is to look upon all the vessels and goods of the monastery as though they were the sacred vessels of the altar. He is not to neglect anything. He is not to be avaricious, not wasteful, not be a squanderer of the monastery's resources. Rather, he is to do everything in proper measure and according to the order of his abbot. Above all else, he is to have humility. When he has nothing material to give to one who makes a request, he is to offer at least a kind word. As it is written, "A kind word is higher than the best gift." Sir 18:17. All that the abbot has entrusted to him, he is to have in his care, and he is not to presume to do what has been forbidden him. To the brothers, he is to offer their allotted ration of food without condescension or delay, so that they are not scandalized, remembering what the sacred text says is merited by one who scandalizes one of these little ones. Matthew 18:6. If the community is large, helpers are to be given to him, thanks to whose assistance he may retain a peaceful soul while fulfilling the office committed to him. Only at the appropriate hours are items for distribution to be distributed, or requested items to be requested, so that no one is perturbed or saddened in the house of God. The tools and possessions of the monastery. The abbot is to provide for the material goods of the monastery, that is, tools, clothes, and any other thing, by means of brothers whose life and character he trusts. And he is to consign to them the different items as he judges best, to be conserved and then collected after use. Of these items, the abbot is to keep a list so that as the brothers are successively assigned to different tasks, he will know what he gives out and what he receives back. If anyone treats the good of the monastery improperly or negligently, he is to be corrected. If he does not amend, he is to be subjected to the discipline of the rule. The craftsmen of the monastery. If there are craftsmen in the monastery, they are to practice their crafts in all humility if the abbot permits it. But if any one of them becomes conceited because of his knowledge of his craft, determining that he thus confers something on the monastery, he is to be taken from that craft and not permitted to exercise it again, unless having humbled himself, the abbot orders him back to it. If any products of the craftsman are to be sold, care should be taken that those by whose hands the transaction takes place do not presume to practice any fraud. They are always to remember Ananias and Sapphira. Acts 5:1-11. Lest the death which those two incurred in the body be suffered in their souls, and those of all who practice any fraud in business of the monastery. In establishing their prices, the evil of avarice must not creep in. Instead, the goods should always be sold for a little less than those living in the world are able to charge, so that in everything God may be glorified. 1 Peter 4:11. The prior of the monastery. Very often it happens that through the appointment of a prior, grave scandals arrive in monasteries. For there are some who, inflated by a malignant spirit of pride and esteeming themselves to be second abbots, assume for themselves tyrannical power, and so feed scandals and create dissensions in the community. And this occurs especially in those places where it is by the same bishop or the same abbots who ordain the abbot that the prior is himself ordained. How absurd this may easily be seen, for as soon as he is ordained, he is given an incentive to pride, his thoughts suggesting to him that he is free from the authority of his abbot, since he has been ordained by the very same persons. Thus arise jealousies, quarrels, detractions, competitiveness, dissensions, and depositions from office. And while the abbot and prior are opposed to one another, it necessarily follows that through this dissension their souls are endangered, and those who are subject to them, being flattered as followers, go to their destruction. The blame for this perilous evil rests on the head of those who are the authors of such disorders. Therefore, we regard it expedient for the preservation of peace and charity that the organization of his monastery depend on the will of the abbot. And if possible, deans should conduct, as we have already arranged, all the affairs of the monastery according to the disposition of the abbot, so that what is committed to several will not cause pride in any single one. But if either the locale requires it, or the community reasonably and with humility requests it, and if the abbot judges it expedient, the abbot, with the counsel of God-fearing brothers, is to choose whoever he wishes and himself ordain him prior. But this prior is to perform with reverence what the abbot demands of him, doing nothing contrary to the abbot's will, for the more he is elevated above the rest, the more solicitously he ought to observe the precepts of the rule. If this prior proves to have vices, or is deceived by the haughtiness of pride, or proves to have contempt for the holy rule, he is to be verbally admonished up to 4 times. If he does not amend, the discipline of the rule is to be applied to him. But if even then he does not amend, he is to be deposed from the office of prior, and another who is worthy be substituted in his place. But if afterwards he is not quiet and obedient in the community, he is to be expelled from the monastery. Nevertheless, the abbot is to bear in mind that he must give an account to God of all his judgments, lest the flame of envy or jealousy be kindled in his soul. Discussion questions. What would be the equivalent of the dean, cellarer, and prior in our churches and ministries today? What can we learn from their separation of duties? Why is it necessary to have offices or positions within a monastery or church? Why can't we all just do what we feel like doing? Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12. Why is humility such an important quality of a leader? How does humility make stronger leaders, not weaker ones? What steps can leaders in ministry take to promote living at peace with one another? What habits in your life foster humility? What habits would help you develop this character quality?